Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
I got the eye of the tiger, a fighter, dancing through the fire, 'cause I am a champion, and you're gonna hear me roar. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. And you're gonna hear me roar. Attempt to sing, not roar.
I got a lot of hot in here. My glasses are even fogging up.
I know. Actually, this hoodie is no longer comfortable.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Wait, what are you going to say?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, good. Nothing could follow that up. Anyway.
Yep.
You are listening / watching the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
We have a very special episode ahead of us today. We have crunched numbers. We have input things into computers and graphs. And charts.
By we mean Donald.
Donald, that's right. We have a special guest today. We're joined by the one and only Donald Miner, who's the founder and creator of EDH Rec, one of my favorite tools online for deck building research, information about the format. It's literally where I recommend everyone to go when they ask me, hey, I need to start building a deck.
Let's be honest. It's the best resource for Commander deck building. Donald, I know you'll agree. Donald,
I'm a little biased. Thanks for having me on. It's really good to be here and talk about this stuff.
It's been a long time since you've been on the show. Since when we had you on the show the first time, no one had heard of EDH Rec.
Yeah, not even you guys.
Yeah, that's true. It was a brand new factoid for us.
Now there's more people that have heard of EDH Rec than have heard of our show. So know the tables have turned.
Yeah. How the turntables.
You guys are still more entertaining than I am.
What? Oh, thanks. Do you remember the date the first time that you came on the show?
I looked it up. It was early July 2015.
2015.
He remembers. Did you press your? Wow. Yeah. Did you press something memorable in your yearbook next to your prom corsage for that date? How did you know that?
I signed it. I looked it up before I came on, and just wanted to see how long it's been. It has been a while.
Wow. It has been a while indeed. But before we get into the episode today, and the topic is how some commanders. How do they become staples? Which ones are going to stay popular? We have to, of course, shout out our sponsors. We should get a defogging company maybe as well.
I mean, this has never happened before. I just think our singing was so bad that my glasses just were done.
Anyway, they don't sell glasses, but they do sell cards. It's cardkingdom.com/commandzone. You're going to buy cards anyway. If you are interested in any of the commanders we talk about today and you want to build a deck around them, well, hey, go to cardkingdom.com/commandzone. You're going to buy them anyway. Just add them to your cart. You don't need to do anything but enter the affiliate link, and you're directly supporting the show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some cool cards. You definitely want to get a hold of them. And when you do, you also want to protect those cards. We would suggest using Ultra Pro sleeves. They are another sponsor of the show. They've got awesome Eclipse sleeves, which are, we think, the best on the market. They also do all the theme stuff for every set. So they've got the War of the Spark stuff. The Modern Horizon stuff will be either out now or coming out very, very soon. Yeah. You know, one thing I like to do, I don't know if you do this, Jimmy, is my commander is usually sleeved in a different color sleeve than the rest of my deck because
boy, do I shuffle that thing in.
I always do that. And if it's blue and the rest of the deck's red, it's really easy to find. Nice. So that's something I would suggest. Again, big thanks to Ultra Pro. And the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/commandzone. In fact, we call out one lucky patron every single episode, and this episode is dedicated to Matthew Lim. Matthew, you rock. Also, I want to say Matthew's email address is from hawaii.edu. So, Matthew, how's it? Shaka bra. Okay.
All right, let's get into the main topic. Now, Donald, you are here. Before we dive into this, we're going to be using the resources that you provided over at EDH Rec and the data that you have access to. So let's talk briefly about where the site came from, and more specifically, where do you collate your data from before we jump into the topic, and so people can know where all the facts are coming from?
Yeah, so this is actually a question I get a lot, and people are really interested in knowing because it does tell you a little bit about what the data is actually saying opposed to what people think it might be saying. So EDH Rec is a website that takes deck data, so your 99 and your commander, from a number of different websites, and I'll explain what those are, and aggregates them and summarizes some statistics, like these are the most played cards in this commander. Or you can do some refined things like the most, decks that are playing Grave Pact and this commander, like what cards are being played. They have other things like budget filters and tribal filters, things like that. So the way that I go about doing this, the first step of this, is collecting the deck data. And the deck data is collected through agreements I have with currently 3 websites. So the first is MTG Goldfish, second is Deck Stats, and the third is Architect, which is kind of the newest deck builder. And so every day, a couple times a day, I have a program that goes out and pulls these deck lists into my database. I do some cleaning, so like if you playing illegal cards or like have messed up in your color identity, things like that, we won't save it. But so there's a little bit of cleansing, and there's also deduplication. So if I see a duplicate deck, even if it's a different, it's a clone of a deck, I remove those things. But so at the end of the day, yeah, I collect these decks. I get about, I think it's about, I want to say 400 or 500 a day these days.
How many total decks are on EDH Rec? About.
Yeah, it's about. So we actually just removed a bunch of the old ones. So before we removed them, we had about 320,000, and
wow.
And then after we removed them, so we just moved recently to this 2-year sliding window. So basically, we're only gonna be showing decks from the past 2 years, mostly because we saw that old decks were like really starting to mess with the stats, and that's about 200,000 decks right now. Is like what's represented on the site.
So still the majority of the decks are from the last 2 years.
And on the show, I think a lot of listeners, if you've been listening for even just a short time, you've heard us reference EDH Rec a lot as sort of like, hey, this card's popular. It's in 20,000 decks on EDH Rec. Now, that number in a vacuum doesn't mean a lot, but it sort of tells you that like that's more than a card that's in 2,000 decks on EDH Rec.
Yep.
So it's likely seeing more play, although you can't necessarily say it's seeing exactly 18,000 more deck play than go ahead.
And just to be nuanced about the language, I'm going to be a little pedantic sometimes with the statistics. These are the counts of the decks that people are putting on the website. So it's not necessarily cards that people are playing or necessarily. So to acknowledge some of the biases in the data, one is that these decks may never be made. Some of them might just be people brewing and they're just like getting an idea about the deck. So there are some things that we have to be a little bit careful about, like making too many jumps to certain conclusions. But I mean, for the most part, like, you look at the data, it kind of looks right most of the time, kind of like forget about some of the details.
Yeah, one of the things when we did our statistics episode while Jimmy was gone, we hired a bunch of people to break down a bunch of gameplay data.
I was really excited.
And one of the interesting things we found was like when we broke down like what are the top most played cards in the decks, and then we compared it to EDH Rec, it was very, very close. Like, Enlightened Tutor was in like the second most played white card, and I think it was 1 or 2 on EDH Rec, and that just followed all along the line, which I thought was kind of good independent confirmation that like at least the statistics are close.
Yeah. I think relatively they're all like, meaning that like if this cat card is more popular on EDH Rec than not. I kind of think relatively they probably match up is usually the way that I describe things. So I try to stay away from like, this card's more. I stick more to like this card's more popular than this one perhaps, and maybe stay away from like this is 17% more popular.
Right, it's hard to get that nuance with the numbers, but you can probably say that it is more popular, just maybe not how much. Okay, that's super cool.
Yeah, and if anything, it points us towards trends, which is sort of what we're going to be talking about today, and the idea of which commanders, quote-unquote, make it, as in which ones become staples of the format. You see those kinds of decks around a lot. Which commanders are sort of flavor of the month, and then which commanders just end up being duds. And we have a lot of data to talk about here, and we're going to be going back a few sets. And so before we get real into it, though, the main statistic that we need to talk about is the mean. So in this analysis of figuring out which ones are staples, which ones are duds, we are looking at the mean. So Donald being our statistician, what is the mean?
So mean in general is like a fancy way of saying average. Okay, so so basically, one of the issues that we ran into when we started analysis, and by we, I want to say that I had some colleagues help me out with some of this data analysis. So a shout out to them for doing such a bang up job. But so the problem we ran into is that commanders, when they're released, naturally are more popular. Just even ones that are super popular are always going to be more popular starting up. There's a couple of examples that we found that were not like that. But so what we wanted to do is make sure that we were comparing things against this average baseline of like, what's the average life of a deck look like in terms of popularity? And it kind of slopes off really fast. It looks like a backwards L, and it slopes down really fast and then comes out. So we wanted to get a sense of like what a normal commander, like average mean commander, behaves over time. So, and that's kind of the baseline that we use to determine whether or not something was behaving above average or below average.
Right. So we are looking at, I think we're going to bring a graph up on screen here, but it's basically looking at the popularity across its first month as one of the more important factors, and then looking at its popularity over the second and third months. Because like you said, commanders, and we'll see this in these graphs moving forward, all are extremely high interest when they peak. More decks are being submitted, but of course those go down. So the mean and the average is going to be two axes on an X and a Y. And one of them represents how well the commander does compared to the average of the first month, and then the second axis is how well it does on the second and third months. So that indicates staying power and all that stuff. And there's a nice...
And we looked at that because I had this we kind of entered into this analysis with a particular hypothesis, and this is something that I've been kind of peeking at for a while, is that so there's popular commanders, and then there's duds, which are pretty easy to differentiate. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I really was interested in is like which commanders are, because I feel like after playing Commander for 10 years now, I've gotten pretty good at figuring out like, oh, look at all this hype around this commander. I know this isn't going to last, right? And so that's looking at the first month versus the second and third months and comparing those two really helped us determine like which ones started up really high and then which ones ended up like starting high and ended up low, right? And that was one of the cases that we really wanted to find that was interesting.
I also think we had talked about recently the fact we had a little hypothesis unknowingly.
Oh, right.
That oftentimes the most powerful commander, or what we would deem to be the most powerful commander in a set, is not actually the most popular commander in a set. And Urza was, what we think will be the most likely candidate for Modern Horizons, which there won't be data on exactly at this moment, or not a ton of data on it. We might get a little whiff of what it might look like. But Vanifar was something we talked about. So it'll be interesting to see if we were correct about that and if that plays out.
And the audience, you too, can guess along with us when we're talking about Modern Horizons and War of the Spark cards, because we have data up to like 35 months for some of these commanders, and these new sets just coming out, we're not going to have any data, but we'll be able to analyze it as it goes on. So if you look at this graph, it looks like there are a lot of commanders that quote-unquote make it, but there are a whole lot of duds as well. And the ones that make it seem like they really make it across a longer period of time. So the ones that stay have super staying power. So the way that we classify them, the way that you guys classify them, which it makes a lot of sense, is it's classified as a dud if it starts off below the average decks, or below sort of the average popularity, and then stays below it. And it's a flavor of the month if it starts above it and then dips below it. And then the staple, or the cards that quote-unquote make it, are the ones that start above the average and stay above the average.
Were there any examples, just you don't have to say what, but of cards that started below average and rose above average over time? That would be really interesting.
There's one particular example I hope we touch on that I think it started above average to begin with, but it was the only example we found that increased in popularity over time.
It was the Titanic. It was the Avatar of commanders.
Yeah, there you go.
For those that don't know, those movie box office curves look opposite of most movies.
Yeah, instead of starting off big and going dipping, it's like, whoa, they're still watching it. More people, oh my gosh.
I believe Titanic's like third weekend is bigger than its first weekend. It's something weird like that. It just doesn't happen with movies. Anyway, sorry, a movie reference for those that probably don't care. Well, okay, so we'll touch on that. I'll be interested to see. Maybe I can guess what it is without having looked at a lot of the graphs. Okay, continue.
All right, let's go on then to our very first category, which I think is the one that people are most interested in. Which commanders made it? I was surprised. I thought more commanders would be on this list. And
these are the popular commanders?
The ones that start above the average and remain above the average over the course of their lifetime.
This is all of them?
This is from since Commander 2017, encompassing 9 sets, about 130 new potential legendary cards. I had to count them all. Only 8 legendaries we have classified here as making it.
So actually, let me correct the analysis.
Oh, sure.
Maybe. So this was just the top 8 highest made it. So there were other commanders that made it.
There were more that made it. These are just the top 8.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Makes sense.
I was like, holy crap, that's pretty low. Do you have any idea how many fit into that category? Are there 10 more? Are there?
Yeah, it was like it was like 18, 19, something like that.
Okay. Cool. So these are the top ones.
So that's still about 20 out of 130 cards that were legendary. Now, a lot of them, Dominaria added a ton of legendary cards to that mix, and a lot of them were clearly not good.
True, some of them were uncommons and stuff, so they were unlikely. Yeah, okay.
But this is really interesting. So if you guys take a look at this list, Muldrotha the Gravetide coming in at number 1, and then we have Edgar Markov, Joda, Lord Windgrace, Gishath, Sons of Avatar, Aminatu, Teysa Karlov, and Arquedes the Strategist.
Shock
Interesting.
is a little bit shocking.
That is the thing that I want to talk about the most out of everything in this episode, is that Gishath is there and Zakama is not
there. Yeah, that is actually a little bit nuts.
I was really. I mean, I double checked that one too.
I did. I
as soon as
triple checked
saw
it. I checked on your website. I was like, this can't be possible. Because to me, as a commander player, Zakama is clearly more powerful. It's not limited by the tribe, and it's in the exact same colors and costs approximately the same amount of mana, if not getting you a huge reduction because it untaps your lands when you cast it. So that was very interesting.
And there's some other examples of commanders that kind of like fit that mold recently that that were complete flavors of the month or duds. And like of all the super hyper specific tribal commanders, that seems, I guess people really like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would say in looking at the list is that you basically have one legendary creature per set, and it looks like with the exception of Commander 2018, because you got Windgrace and Aminatu on here.
Yeah,
but everything else,
it's
too. Well, Edgar Markov is from the previous. It's from the
right.
It's from Commander 2017. So everything on here seems to be like Muldrotha for that set. Edgar Markov. Oh no, Muldrotha came out with Joda, so I'm totally wrong.
It's interesting though. The
there goes that theory.
The precons make sense though because they're the things that are the most bought, right? So I guess people are brewing. It's the easiest thing for a new player to brew around.
I'm just saying, like, if a large majority of the people gravitate towards one specific commander more than the rest, then it's going to take a bigger bite out of the pie, and it's hard for another commander from that set to make it high onto this list.
That's a good point.
You know, assuming that for most players, and I think this is probably true, building like 3 new decks every time a set comes out is not really possible. You're going to choose one most of the time. I mean, that's what I do. Rarely would I ever build 2 because there's just not time.
Yeah. I would also say that Muldrotha and Joda, for being in the same set, have very different types of power.
True.
Like Muldrotha and Teysa, they have this overall just pure value, right? They're very easy to build around. Joda is all about cheating costs and like landing monstrous huge cards on the battlefield. So it's even kind of like Muldrotha is more of a Johnny type deck. And Joda seems like either Spike or Timmy, right? Just kind of, you want to play the biggest thing in the world.
But look, yeah, you've got one from Dominaria, one from Commander 2017. Okay, another one from Dominaria. But if you X that out, then you go Commander 2018.
Yeah.
Ixalan. Teysa is from Guilds.
Yeah,
and then Arcades is from M19. So it's like each set is sort of represented in there.
Yeah. And I would say Arcades was the best of the cycle of dragons as well, right?
It wasn't the strongest, though, was it?
I think
just
it's the
most exciting.
And the most underserved, which is like Defender Tribal.
Right.
There's only one, like Duran really gets towards that, but not there aren't very many other cards. And it's in new colors, so I could see that being interesting for, I guess, more casual brewing. But it's so hard to have conjecture about this when it's just like, well, maybe someone just wanted to make a deck list and never made it into a real deck.
I actually wonder. I hope somebody from WotC is watching this, and because I think it might be designer centric. You know, like maybe some of the WotC designers are better at
making specific commander cards.
Oh, would it be really interesting to know who designed each legendary creature
and
then seeing who's on the list? Yeah. Well, they can do that. They probably won't give it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all pretty good. Gavin, Ethan,
Yeah.
Sean Main was there for a lot of this stuff. I mean, everybody over there can make good cards, so I would be surprised.
So I had some questions for this first data set, which is the first question we already asked, which is Gishath versus Zakama. Gishath is number 14 on the list on EDH Rec, and Zakama is number 71. So it's like, what is the difference in between?
That is shocking.
What's the difference? And I was thinking, could it be that tribal we've never had tribal dinosaurs and it came out in the sets, or could it be that there's a Zakama deck typically costs more because it's all about ramping out, and those kinds of cards like Mana Vault and stuff cost a lot of money, and there's a Zakama deck seems more spiky in nature as opposed to less like because we're drawing from a few websites, and I would say Goldfish has more competitive decks on there for sure, but who knows? I mean, that's huge, right? 14
Donald, do you have any thoughts on what? I mean, could the data be incorrect in any way here, or do you?
No, I mean, this is pretty like there just aren't as many Zakama decks, and I'm not sure that for me personally, I'd be more excited about building a Zakama deck than a Gishath deck. And I think I could. It sounds like the three of us kind of agree on that. So maybe there's some sort of bias there about who we are
as players. Yeah, perhaps.
I mean, my 7-year-old has a Gishath deck. So
yeah, I mean, Gishath is definitely more Timmy than Zakama is. Yeah.
Big dinosaur bringing out more dinos.
It goes towards what we're saying, which is Zakama is more of a powerful card
right.
than but that doesn't always equal
Necessitate.
popularity, right?
Yeah.
Power and popularity don't go together.
Well, one thing I kind of asked myself too about some of these commanders, and I think some of them may be better examples as Zakuma, but does the card need to exist? Like, is there demand for some sort of archetype that it's supporting? I think Arcades Sabbath or Arcades the Strategist is a good example of that. I think Gashanth is also, and I guess there's some sort of demand for that archetype, and Zakuma is good, but is I think it kind of lends itself to this good stuff deck of, I guess, Naya control of some sort.
Just Naya good
right.
stuff, which is an actual name for a deck, right?
Yeah, and maybe Naya good stuff's not like a good demand. Like,
It's a good deck, but it's not exciting to build, right? You don't go, oh boy, I want to build this good stuff deck. It doesn't get you.
Like Grixis is like a great good stuff wedge, It's like
Yeah,
Well, it's
that's
interesting. That's I was going to ask about Arcades because Verena also exists within this same set period of time that we're looking at, and Verena's like ultimate zombie tribal in 3 colors. But I guess we just have so many zombie options that card didn't take off in the same way that Arcades did.
Right, the vote's getting split on Verena because there's a ton of zombie decks possible. Whereas if you want to build Defender Tribal, Wall Tribal, Arcades is kind of like your only real good option.
Yep.
I mean, obviously Doran and there are a few others have done it poorly in the past, but Arcades is just clearly better than those most of the time.
And then you have Joda versus a card like Ramos, which kind of is similar, right? Making huge tons of mana, but I guess Joda is just way easier to use, and the Ramos thing requires a little bit more to build around. But it's interesting to see the difference in the numbers. Like Joda's number 4 popularity right now, and Ramos is number 24. So still popular, but nowhere near as just look at Joda, you know how it's cool.
Interesting.
All right.
Okay, let's move to the next section.
Yes, flavors of the month. Which commanders were like, dang, I really love mint chocolate chip with that Rocky Road swirl, but after a bit, it gets real old.
If I eat that every day, I don't like
exactly.
it. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I didn't know where you were going at first, but but now I'm just hungry.
So this graph is much less impressive than the first one, as in all the little bars are just right by the average, right? They're starting right above it, and they're sort of dipping below it. And the list here, we have Amara, Soul of the Accord, Prime Speaker Vanifar, which I would have expected to be one that made it, Tishana, Voice of Thunder, Azoni Thousand-Eyed, Lazav the Multifarious, Nikia of the Old Ways, Nikia, and Yennet, Cryptic Sovereign. This is very interesting. Look at how many of these cards are from Ravnica.
Yeah, actually.
Amara, Vanifar, Azoni,
Lazav,
Lazav,
Amara,
Nikia.
Vanifar, you called out, and that's an interesting one to me. But this is one I would have actually thought would be on this list, because to me, Vanifar is a deck that the way it probably plays out is you're excited to build it when you first do it. You play it a few times, and you realize, oh, this deck does the same thing every time.
Right.
It very specifically does the same thing every time because of the way that the commander is built. And so, once I sacrifice a 3 CMC thing, I'm always going to go get the same 4 CMC thing and then go up the chain in the same way each time. And so I can see that being like, the realization as you play it or as you see it played of like, oh, this isn't that fun as I thought it was going to be, right? So I can see that one starting out as exciting and dipping down lower and being like, which is what we've seen. I haven't seen a ton of Vanifar decks out in the wild.
It's pretty linear, right?
I personally experienced one of these on this list. So I would like to say, too, kind of a little bit more background on these. These were just a couple of examples that we pulled out. There were a lot of commanders that fit this category. I should have got the exact number, but there are a lot that do this. And
I would assume this is the average of your commander. If you just flip a coin on average, it's going to land to being a flavor of the month.
I personally experienced this one. For example, I built a Lazav Multifarious deck. I opened one in a pre-release and really liked it in my my sealed pod, and it was a really fun card to play with. And I was like, oh, he's going to be a shapeshifter. He's going to do all kinds of crazy things, and it just wasn't very good. And and I think
it also doesn't have hexproof like the other Lazav, which is just very nutty on that card.
Yeah, so I think I've gotten burned by it a couple times. I think on the other end too, some of the ones that I saw as well were like Admiral Beckett Brass, for example, was one that was really popular kind of at the beginning, and then at this point now is not seeing any play anymore. And
no new pirates.
Yeah.
Well, but one thing that's really interesting is compare that to Gashanth. They were releasing the same set. They both had super narrow tribes, and one survived and one didn't. And
could it just be the raw power level of the card? Because Gashanth, you play it and it kind of happens.
Yeah.
But with Beckett Brass, you have to hit with a lot of creatures to really get that triggered ability going.
And if it's a Timmy, like the draw is more to the Timmy crowd, like play big, huge things. Pirates aren't big, huge things, right? So if you're going to like that, you're going to just gravitate towards like Wizards or something that's just a better tribe.
Yeah.
I think after you try it, because there's just not enough support for the Pirates.
Question is, what if they did that but with ninjas and Beckett Brass was like a ninja?
Well, they did Eureka.
I know, right?
Yeah, and that's a hugely popular.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's going to be more popular because of Modern Horizons.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
probably that has something to do with it too. Like,
Interesting.
if they do another set and they put a bunch more dinosaurs in, Gashoth is probably going to, bump back up, depending if they give you a new legendary option for dinosaurs, maybe not. But if they don't, then that's going to be the go-to for dinosaurs, maybe. So that could have something to do with some of this stuff.
I think a lot of the flavor of the month commanders too will probably fit in this category, which is they're just better inside the deck rather than leading it. Right? They're like good enough to catch your attention to float the idea that they might be good leading a deck, but ultimately they almost sort of all fit into another deck that has a strategy that they can abuse. Token wise, Azoni, Thousand Eyed may not be the best commander, but it's an amazing card in any green black deck that has dredge, obviously. So it's interesting to see. And Nikia too, I think, is the ultimate example of that. You don't necessarily want to have the mana doubling ability on your commander. You'd rather have Zendikar Resurgence and those kinds of cards in the middle that can do that instead.
I want to throw. Go ahead, Donald.
The one example that I saw in here that stood out from the different ones, and I specifically remember watching this when it came out, was Tishana, where Simic had gotten I think of all the two color combinations,
Guilds,
has probably gotten the most, right? And I think that one was a case of, wasn't there there was the next it's escaping me now, but there was another Simic commander that was very similar to in the next set or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Tishana, they kind of went on that merfolk thing.
Yeah.
And also just in general, it's you're going to draw cards and play lands and draw cards, or something's going to draw you a card and it
There's
revolves.
Kumena.
Yeah, Kumena, right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's just what Simic does, right? Draw you a ton of cards or give you a bunch of
Repeatable
mana.
value,
Prime Speaker Zagana is not that different than Tishana. when you break it down, they both just draw you a bunch of cards.
Pure and Toothy, and then you got Tatiova.
Right.
I'm getting tired. And I think
again, the votes getting split, I think, on those cards.
And if none of them really stand out in the same way that sort of the cards in the first one do, then they fall by the wayside.
I don't want to throw this paper because what if we refer to these later? I'm sorry, everybody. I'm not going to throw the paper on this one. Jimmy is, though.
Because we have two.
Okay, true.
All right, last category, the saddest category. Which commanders were duds? These commanders, they started below the mean, the average, and then they stayed below the average.
These are the box office bombs.
Yeah, the box office bombs for sure.
This is Geely.
I think you can kind of guess a
Not
lot
Avatar?
of these are uncommons from Dominaria. Cards like Slyn Voda, Zahid, the Djinn of the Lamp, Quenda, Pride of Femeref, Rona, Disciple of Gix. There's two colors there at least.
Yep.
Kazarov, Nyambi, Garna, Trustani. Nyambi, Faithful Healer, is literally just a legendary creature that was built into that precon deck to fetch out a specific Teferi that no one plays.
Yeah.
So definitely going to be some of the most underperforming of all time.
There are multiple cards on this list. I don't even know exactly what they do. I'll be honest.
Well, there's a surprisingly high number. If you go look at the EDH rec stats, set by set, every set has 3 or 4 of them that just are complete duds where they're not even going to see any play. And I think there's a lot of them that you could just say they didn't design that for Commander at all, right? And that's fair. Maybe Dominaria but there's a couple in there that are we're designed for. I think we're designed for Commander, but just they just
didn't find any audience at all.
The one the perfect example of that, I think, is the one. Oh, man, the name escapes me. The one that the white one that switches its life.
Halcyon? Yeah, Evra Halcyon something. Yeah, you can pay 4 and you'll switch your life total with its power, and it has lifelink.
Yeah, like that. I don't really see playing that. I don't know. Maybe I don't know much about other formats, but
because you gotta be crazy.
Yeah, and you have to give haste to it in mono white somehow, so you don't just get axed out of nowhere. What if he just gets pathed? There's so many bad things that could happen in that scenario.
Yeah. And even in the
it's mono white already.
Yeah.
even in the commander sets, there's duds. So there's a few duds which. I really do wonder if they go back and they say, well, these are duds. Usually they're the Boros or red ones.
Right.
There was the Jund one. What was our there's this last Commander product. There was a bunch of duds, honestly.
Yeah, and some of those old cards they reprint just aren't viable as commanders, even though they're old legendaries, and they sort of put them in there as options for you. I mean, how many times when we, like maybe once or twice, and when we review the precons, we go, you're better off using this instead of the commander it comes with.
Yeah.
So they're almost better always as just supporting. So unfortunate for the duds. I would say a lot of commanders end up down here, and it's okay to be a dud. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, your status. We're going to figure out... We're going to talk about some cards and sort of make our own predictions because, again, we don't have enough information for more of the Spark or Modern Horizons to sort of do this 3-month average that we've been doing for everything else.
War hasn't been out for 3 months yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Modern Horizons hasn't either, just in case you didn't know.
True. So before we go into it, some of the things that we've discovered are staple traits. So the cards need to be powerful and popular, right? Recurable, consistent value seems to be a big one. The Planeswalkers, Muldrotha, and then also popular but underserved strategies. So Arquedes and Gishath with being tribal, defender, and dinosaur, and then just raw power level. Or if it's 5 color, I've seen also does well. The best performing commander out of Battle Bond by far is that red one that's 5 color.
Najeela?
Najeela,
yeah. But also the most powerful card commander. That's a tier 1 deck if you build it that way. And but in general, I would say often the most powerful card is not the most popular.
Yeah, they have to sort of balance between the two. So let's take a look. Obviously, War of the Spark, Feather the Redeemed, Niv-Mizzet Reborn, and the God Eternals are what I thought might be up there. Clearly, Feather as being the Boros savior of all time. This card just blew up statistically, right?
Yeah, it's already the most popular Boros commander, I think, in the past 2 years. And it just does something really different. It's an underserved, underserved in the sense that all the other Boros commanders suck. And
it's underserved in that if you want to play Boros in a way that is not involving you in combat specifically, you didn't really have a lot of options, right? So this actually opened up a bunch of cards that you could now play that you never could put in a deck before. All these combat tricks that draw you a card and things like that are just not playable cards in a deck. And I think we see that across, that's really what Arcades is.
Yeah.
Arcades is saying, hey, all these wall and defender cards that you just couldn't play with before, now you can put these all in a deck. And people get excited because they've got a bunch of those cards already in their box, and they just haven't had a home for them. And so they're like, sweet, all these cards I can never play are now cards that are good in this deck.
And make it really easy to build as well, and cheap, right?
Yeah, and Feather fits that mold to a T.
I wonder, though, I think the one thing that I am nervous about for Feather is that I think it does force you to build a pretty... Feather's going to have a lot of staples, like a good...
Yeah.
I think 30 to 40 cards are going to be decided for you just by choosing that commander. And I think that lack of customization that it affords you, I think, might make it suffer in the long term, but I think we're playing in new territory here since it's Boros, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen.
But a large percentage of those cards are just you don't need them anywhere else, like Shelter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's just going to be there's no reason to take that deck apart because you don't need... Yeah, you don't need Balduvian Rage in any of your other decks, so you're just whatever. I may as well keep this deck together.
And interestingly enough, I would say every set we would get minimum 1, maybe 2 cards that would go well in Feather. Pretty much every set guaranteed. Because it's a part of just how limited works for red. They like to have...
Defiant Strike is just a card you wouldn't even look at for Commander. But now, hey, if you got a Feather deck, it can go in there. So
yeah,
really good point.
So Feather, by far the most popular commander from War of the Spark, and it's followed somewhat closely by Niv-Mizzet Reborn. And then after that, it sort of drops off very steeply to Ilharg, the Razebore, Tosamir, and then of the God Eternals, God Eternal Kefnet, although it's very close with Oketra in terms of their relative popularity. This doesn't surprise me. Again, I think 5 color is a really easy way to get people to go, I can sort of build whatever I want around this, and it's generically powerful. And that very much is the case, I think, with Niv-Mizzet Reborn.
I think Niv-Mizzet is consensus the most powerful of the commanders from this set.
5 colors, draws you a ton of cards. It's just a big flyer in the air. A lot of value tied on there. And you don't need to be like Tolsimir, which is just wolves.
Yeah, it's a borderline tier 1 deck if you build it correctly again.
I think any commander that gives you gas in some way, right? I think those, Muldrotha is a good example of that. Niv-Mizzet's a good example of that. Arcades is even a good example of that because it draws off the defender. So I think people like just getting more cards, and I really don't like commanders that just sit around where I'm top decking all day either. So
Ilharg's a little surprising. I'm not surprised by Tolsimir because it fits that Arcades mold of
of
hey, all your
Kashath.
wolves, what were you doing with them before? Like, seriously, what deck were they going in? I mean, before we even knew Morophon existed, there was not really a commander for wolves at all. Now there's kind of two, but Tolsimir I would expect to be up there. Ilharg, though.
Yeah, interesting, right? Maybe it's just because red is so starved of value that anytime someone gets a chance to do something, like I would be interested to see if Atali, which is that 4 red guy that when he swings, you're exiling cards off your opponent's library. If that card has any similarities to the growth rate of what Ilharg is, because they seem
that
like
card's just better than Ilharg, right?
Yeah, I think so. But they feel very similar to me, right? In that they're about attacking, they're mono red, they do something that red's not great at doing. We'll see.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I am surprised by Ilharg because it is pretty narrow.
You're surprised it's so high or so low?
So high.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's not doing anything like Atali's a really good example.
Right.
I would build Atali first every time over Ilharg.
What surprises me is that Neheb, Dreadhorde champion, so he lets you discard your entire hand and redraw it and then add that much red mana. Like that, I feel like is the best red effect here. Atali still, I think, is slightly more powerful, but I think that Neheb card is. I was interested because I was like,
definitely more powerful than Ilharg, I would say.
Yeah, I was like, that is what red needs. That seems like it would be a more likely candidate for commander, but maybe people aren't as interested in that effect as just dropping a huge creature with Ilharg.
I think in black red though, Neheb has a little bit more competition for really strong commanders. And,
no, this is the mono red Neheb from War of the Spark that we were talking about.
For some reason,
that's like when it deals combat damage, you discard and then add that much red and draw that many cards.
Yeah.
Which seems pretty darn good for red, but hey, it's interesting. I like that Neheb almost more than my current Neheb, but it makes sense. I think there's so much, again, when you overwhelm people with so many choices and you're releasing sets so constantly, you are only going to see the absolute best drift to the top. And everything else, I think, is just sort of going to be in contention around the same area below.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Donald, but I would say everything below Niv Mizzet. So Ilharg, Tolsimir, Kefnet Oketra, Fibblethep, Massacre Girl, Neheb, Rolesk, they're probably within the statistical plus minus to be relatively close to even, Is that like fair to say?
So I think the way this is trending right now, if things don't change, is that Feather and Niv Mizzet are going to quote unquote make it, and then the Ilharg, like the people that are building Ilharg all the way down to like Massacre Girl, Neheb are. I mean, we're just not going to see those decks in 6 months.
It'll be roughly the same amount of people for all those decks, and it won't be a ton. Yeah.
I would predict that God Eternal Kefnet does the best out of that whole group because mono blue, I think a lot of people, if they want to build it and they don't want to go super spiky, they always have other ways of doing it that might be fun.
I mean, Kefnet is...
The original Kefnet, I still see decks of that around.
Yeah, but you got Urza
this
coming.
Kefnet is ridiculous. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So good segue, Donald. You're a pro. Moving on to Modern Horizons here. Segway Man showed up. Has been a while.
It's been a long while. Maybe since Donald's been on the show. Clearly.
Which was like 17 years ago.
Yeah.
So Modern Horizons on the horizon, and we have very, very little data about this one, right? Like because people can start building decks maybe like only within the last like week or so.
It depends on when the websites even add the cards to be able to add to your deck.
And some are spoiled sooner than others. So the data before the release date's all kinds of messed up.
Right. Oh yeah, because if Urza was very early, we heard it was like the second day of spoilers, so that they just had more time to brew that online than say something that came out more lately.
True.
I don't know the order of all of them. So
also like how many people saw our preview video as opposed to a blog post about another card that may be a better commander even.
Right. It's just the information takes a little while to filter out. So okay, so let me just read off the legendary creatures in Modern Horizons, and then we'll talk about them a little. So there's Urza, the mono blue one, Yawgmoth, the mono black one, Sisay, 5-color, Ayula, the bear tribal,
Pashalik Mons,
Mons, the goblin-y one, First Sliver, 5-color slivers, Hogak, the Golgari Dredge Convoke one, and Morophon, the open-ended tribal 5-color.
Yeah.
What would you predict, Donald?
And viewers and listeners.
Yeah. But we can't. We're not going to hear their answer right now.
I don't know. If you listen hard enough, you may be able to hear the future.
We'll hear them from the future. Donald, what would you predict is going to make it from this list?
I'm going to choose one I definitely think is going to make it.
I mean, I think Urza's definitely going to make it. That card is just too good. It's good. It's versatile. It does what blue wants to do. I think it does some things that are different than other blue commanders too. It's not like stepping on anybody's toes too much. And
interesting.
I mean, it's got CDH potential. I think it's got regular person potential. I don't know.
Regular person potential.
All us regular folk, while CDH runs away with it.
So
Clearly,
do you think Urza will be the most popular?
Okay. So I think it's going to make it, but I think there's a couple of other here that are going to make it too.
yeah.
I think that the Amorophon, the tribal thing, is going to make it.
Has to. That
has
one is
to.
my easy vote because it's any tribe you want.
It's
Morphon's your man.
I think
Morphon,
not only that, we may see like a new tribe get released with a new set that would needs to be built with this guy. And
interesting.
I just think
anytime if they come up with like some new tribe for some new plane, Morphon will be the default commander for that. So in that month, 9 months from now or 18 months from now, it'll just bump it back up at that point, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But right now on the stats, it's actually in 5th out of the 8, which is it's got half the number of decks of Urza does.
He's cheating. He already knows the
I know,
stats.
he's got the
Okay.
stats.
I've got
Okay, don't tell us the stats yet because we want to
Okay,
guess.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So
Okay.
so I'll stop there. I think there's one other
Urza
that's
and
gonna make
Morphon?
it, but I'll let you guys go.
Okay, Urza's number 1 clearly. I think it has the most hype.
See, I disagree.
I think it's going to be flavor of the month.
Yeah,
is
that's
where
what I think. I think it's going to
yeah.
go the way of Vanifar. I think it'll seem like it's popular, and it'll actually end up being like not that popular in the long run. Yeah.
I think Ayula, Queen Among Bears, is going to make it
I'm with
super
you.
hard.
I'm with you.
For the remainder of time, this is going to be one of the most popular commanders of all time. I'm just calling it now.
Yeah, I'm with you.
There's so many bears in the history of Magic.
And it's like janky and cute.
Yeah.
Like, you pull out your bear tribal deck, and it's like...
But powerful.
I think that card is legit good, and that deck will be like good, but it won't be like... It can't be a 9 out of 10. It tops out at a 7 or so, but that's perfect for most playgroups.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be popular.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ayula for me is like going to be popular. Yeah. It'll make it out of this group. I think Morophon as well. I agree with Donald.
I could see the first sliver just on the basis that people love slivers. I don't know who they are. But I know it's a very popular
There
archetype.
just are multiple options right now to build slivers, and this is another one, and it's a very good one. But
is it better than Sliver Queen?
Yeah.
I think Sliver Overlord is still the best.
Overlord,
and it can fetch this guy too, so it's kind of like,
right.
Do I?
Right, this first sliver can't fetch Overlord or Queen, but Overlord can get the other one, so it makes sense. If you're really going to build a sliver deck, you probably go... I'm just saying also it splits the vote. Like
there's so many choices.
And you could run Morphon as a sliver. Like
I think Morphon would be a sweet Eldrazi treble, by the way. 5-color Eldrazi, finally.
It doesn't reduce the cost. Well, I guess... Does it work on the Devoid ones? Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
so,
I guess so.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I think Sisay's got to be up there because I think the 5-color thing gives her a slight bump over everyone else.
I think it does.
Yeah, I just think she's not that. I think Yawgmoth's actually more interesting than Sisay.
I think Sisay might edge out because Planeswalkers, like just Super Friends, is a really popular archetype, right?
Interesting.
And I think it's pretty good for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so Urza number 1. I'm gonna say Ayula number 2 for me, and then Yawgmoth, Sisay.
This is out the gate.
This is out the gate. What Donald has in front of him right now. Ding ding ding.
All right.
Ding, ding,
what do we got? What are we looking at right now? Which is super early, folks. I just want to say this.
And so many different factors are going to affect this.
Read down the order for us, Donald.
Yeah. So right now, this is shortly before release. Urza is the highest at 48 decks, but also too maybe biased a little bit because it was spoiled a little bit earlier.
Yeah. We also challenged our viewers to make the deck, so maybe we're actually single-handedly pushing that forward.
Sisay's next with 35. Yep. And then Ayula is then after that. But Ayula, Yawgmoth, and Morophon are all within a few decks. So that's kind of the next tier down. And then you take a next step down to 18 decks at first sliver. And then you take a long way down to Hogak at 3 decks.
Oof. Poor Hogak.
And Pashalek and Pashalek at 3 decks as well. So,
who are the 3 people that built Pashalek? Let me know. Tweet at me. I want to know who you are.
I mean, that's just not a super interesting deck to build. It's going to be goblin-y tribal.
You could build so many other better goblin decks,
well,
too.
not just better. Just like if you're going to build that deck, you don't have to actually even go onto a site and build it. You can just be like, look up a Grenzo deck, do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to.
I
have to do a lot of brewing.
I have a mono red goblin deck that I've kind of swapped out the commanders for now and then, and I just can't take this one seriously. It's not. Yeah. It's not funny. It's not good.
It's no Ayula.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just got a lot of competition, and I just don't think a lot of people are going to build it. They also there's the new Krenko, the 10th Street whatever.
Right.
Is pretty decent, right? And I think people are building that instead.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I predict Urza will be not the top in 3 months, though.
I think Ayula is just going to stay the most consistent just forever.
More fun Ayula, or maybe Dark Horse Yawgmoth, I think in 3 months will be more popular.
I don't think I'm a mono black player, and I was a little disappointed with
Yawgmoth.
With Yawgmoth, to be honest. I think it was close, but it's going to be sack
anything to Urza that no other monocolored commander I think has ever come close to what Urza presents, just in terms of like it's all here.
Yep,
which is pretty nuts.
Yep.
Okay. I'm about to talk about something that I think is really interesting.
Okay.
And Donald brought up as well, which is the game nights effect. Now, we talk about a lot of things having an effect on this. You know, people talking about spoilers, previews, when sets come out. And of course, we also happen to feature a lot of cards on our site as well. People have told us that we have sold cards out of Card Kingdom because we featured them so heavily. Treasure tokens around the world cower in fear when they hear Josh Lee Kwai's name.
Shadowborn Apostles.
Shadowborn Apostles, yeah.
And I mean, that's a special case, let's be honest. Because if anybody's going to buy that card, they have to buy 30 of them.
Yeah.
So. and you get them all from Josh Lee Kwai's store, right?
Yeah.
I've never sold a single card. So.
Josh does have a storehouse of... What card was it that you have a bunch of still?
Supreme Verdicts.
Yeah.
I went on Brainstorm Brewery once and I got excited.
Yeah.
And but I've still literally never sold a card online.
Yeah.
Like, they just all sit there.
So let's talk about and look at some statistics on game nights when the episode's released and the podcast as well, because we do deck tech as well, and see if it has an effect on card popularities and sort of the meta around the world. This is the beauty of EDH Rec. All of this data is able to be tracked.
So you kind of look at the date when that game nights came out and then the immediate aftermath as far as like how many decks of those types are built like in the following days. Yeah.
So game nights number 11. This is, I'd say, still in the infancy of game nights, right? We hadn't gotten to our... we just moved to a new set.
This was the first episode that was on our new set.
That's right.
That wasn't in your condo.
Yeah.
It wasn't a GoPro taped to a lamp. It was a GoPro taped to a different thing. Yeah.
What a beautiful day. And I remember that too, that the GoPro footage messed up, and I got so upset because they didn't record at the right resolution.
Oh, yeah. The resolution changed. But we did have the windows behind us for the first time.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we played Gashoth, Sun's Avatar, Take a Damage, Amaryl Beckett Brass, Tishana, Voice of Thunder, and Vona, Butcher of Magan. And it doesn't actually look like anything happened here, does it, Donald?
No.
This had zero effect on.
I think the when I looked at the graph that is on here, you can see that Admiral Beckett Brass has shifted a little bit to the left of that line. I did look at that. I think that spike was caused by when I looked at the data at my more fine-comb look. So I think of that.
That was the deck that won, notably.
Yeah.
There's a line down the middle of each of these graphs we're going to show, or not down the middle, but there's a line. Is that the date when game nights came out?
Yeah. So the problem is the problem with this analysis is we do a little bit of smoothing on the lines, because if you look at it, if you plot the data day by day, there's so much up and down that we have to smooth it out by the week to actually make like a chart that makes some sense. So that spike that you see on the Beckett Brass, like that basically is there were quite a few decks that were put out directly after the video that contributed to that spike. But also too, there was a building up to the video as well. So it seemed like maybe it was increasing already. So
it's got to be hard to parse, because people are naturally excited about new cards when they come out, and game nights are coming out like when the set is not quite released. So like they're already like if we came out with we're going to come out with our Modern Horizons one. Urza's not in it, we've already said. But if it was, and it won that game, it would be hard to tell because people are just naturally already building a lot of Urza decks right now. So yeah, it's hard to sort of.
Yeah, I agreed. I think for a lot of the ones that when I was looking at the data for the ones where you guys were doing like a topical kind of episode like that, I had a hard time really determining whether it was related to. But you guys had a couple of examples. I'll segue into maybe a couple the next one.
Before we segue, I just want everyone to look at Vona on this poor graph.
Poor Vona. No one cared about Vona.
It's just slithering along the bottom.
It's just not good.
Game Night's number 16, one that I won, just so everyone remembers, featuring Animar, Soul of Elements.
This was the Animar Morph deck.
Yes, Grenzo, Numont the Devastator, and Rushme, Eternity's Crafter. Now, notably, Animar has a huge spike here, but this was also the first time it'd ever been reprinted, and the price for Animar had like really gone up.
Or gone down.
Yeah, or gone down. So I'm interested to see if you think that was partially due to the show, or if you think it was a combination of both the card now being more easily accessible to people that had wanted to build Animar in the past but couldn't.
Yeah. So a lot of these episodes, as a viewer myself of your content, the one thing that you guys hit every now and then is kind of like a unique idea around a deck that really, and especially when it plays well in the game, it really inspires me personally to like look into building the deck, right? And and particularly remembering that episode, I felt that way after watching that episode, right? So
interesting.
I do believe that I think this spike is a real spike, like that you guys were involved in, that breathed some new life into the deck by playing it in a slightly different way, and people like morphs, and it just seemed like it hit the right.
And I think
chords.
it would be easier to tell on an episode like this because it's not like Animar, Granzmo, Rushme, Numont were cards that were brand new. Yes, some of them were getting reprinted and some weren't. But at the same time, they had been around for a while. So a spike in interest in those can be more likely attributed to us than something like the Ixalan episode.
Big shout out to Vinny for making the deck then.
The Animar Morph deck? Yeah, that is a sweet deck. Okay, so the next one is another episode that was not tied to a set release. And this is Game Night's number 18. We had the Professor and Wedge. This was their second episode where we played
Commander.
Yeah, and I was playing Athreos. Prof was playing Sig, Jimmy, you were playing Neheb the Worthy, and Wedge was playing Ruhan of the Fomori.
I was deemed unworthy that game.
This is the deck that there's two decks I've played on game nights that the most people tell me they built that deck and they have my version of the deck or some version of my version. And this Athreos Shadowborn Apostles one is easily the top deck that people tell me, like, hey, I built that deck because of you and I have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, look at this graph. There was a huge spike after the show released, and notably, we also usually do the deck techs for the decks usually like a week later. This was a day after the episode released, we put out your deck tech as well. So there may have been a little bit of extra fuel there as well.
Yeah, this one was in one in particular. This is a real spike.
You did it, Josh.
This is probably
not what we're trying to do. I just want to put that out there in any way. We're just playing decks we think are fun.
Yeah.
I wish we could play a deck and the price of everything would go down. I don't like that Shadowborn Apostles got so much more expensive, but it's just kind of a side effect of like the deck's cool, it played well. What are we supposed to do? Like that's what we're trying to do on the show is be entertaining and show cool things off. And the side effect, I actually don't think is good, but there's no way for us to remove that side effect. Yeah.
If anything, maybe people will build similar decks, but yeah.
It was a relatively good idea too for a deck. You know, I think.
Well, thank you, Donald.
Like, I don't know. It was just like it wasn't something that I think a lot of people had thought about doing, and it seemed to work really well with Shadowborn Apostles, which are a cool idea in general. So I mean. I wasn't surprised at all by this, and even when I was watching the episode, I was like halfway through. I was like, yeah, I need to buy like a bunch of these.
Well, you weren't the only one.
And I didn't, of course. Yeah, no, that's how I bought my new car is selling Shadowborn Apostles.
I often wonder if, let's say, the deck didn't win that game,
right?
Maybe did similar things but ended up losing, like what would the outcome have been? I mean, obviously we've said this many times, we don't script the show, we don't script the games, we play them and it ends how it ends, and that's why sometimes people are mana screwed and they don't make big plays, and that's just the way that it goes. We want the gameplay to be authentic.
So Well, so far all the spikes have been the decks that won,
Yes,
right?
they have been related to them. I would be interested in looking at a card like Smothering Tithe, for instance, in your Boros deck, which did an amazing job, but the deck didn't win.
Yeah.
But I think, like we always say this, like it's always nice when every deck has a chance to show what it's able to do at least once when you're playing game nights. And maybe that's all it does actually take. The winning might just be like a little extra value on top, but maybe just the one singular big play is really the real showcase it needs.
Right. No, but I think Donald makes a good point. Like Smothering Tithe, that was going to be the price it was going to be because that card's just amazing. Us showing it or not has nothing to do with how good that card is. But I can see Shadowborn Apostles being a deck people or Animar Morph being decks that just weren't on people's radars as like things that they would even think of building, and so that's like something like, oh, that looks cool and fun. I'm going to do that now.
Yeah. Speaking of things that aren't cool and fun, how about when we got stomped on the fan episode number 24 by a card called Kozilek?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to Ashlyn.
So in this episode, this was the episode with Jacob and Ashlyn, and I was playing my rune deck. Jimmy, you were playing Anna Fenza the Foremost. Ashlyn played Kozilek, a colorless deck, and Jacob was playing his Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better, which was Ikra Shadiki and Ludovic. And our most popular episode of Game Nights to date, if you just look at the metrics from a standpoint of like fastest out the gate. Obviously, it has less views than some of our episodes that have been around for 2 years, but the trajectory is better than those.
Yeah.
So a lot of people watched it. And yeah, I'm looking at a huge spike for specifically Kozilek.
And the other commanders kind of didn't really have as much of an effect on them, it seems.
They just continue along the same path they were on. Nothing really happens, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't... go ahead, Dom.
Well, I was going to say, when I think about these episodes as a viewer, right? Like if you ask me, hey, do you remember that episode where we had the fan and Ashlyn on? And I was like, yeah, that's the game with Kozilek in it. I have no recollection at all about what the other three decks were.
Because it was
that's
such a
standout thing for you.
Yeah, it just dominates at the end of the game there.
Yeah. I mean, there's other events in your games that are really memorable to me where I don't really remember the rest of the game. Like, I remember recently where Rachel won with, like, Exsanguinate or something. So, like, there's certain aspects of games that I remember that really stick with me a long time. And I think in a 4-player Commander game, sometimes I think just it's hard to get everybody to stand out.
It's definitely true.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah,
in the Rachel game, I would say the moment that gets called out the most is the counterspell war that Rachel and I had because we're not in counterspell colors.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, holy crap, counterspell war between Boros and Orzhov.
Yeah.
And
it'd be good to see how those specific weird cards did as well as a result.
Yeah.
So I think the general analysis here is that game winners tend to make things a little more popular, or it's someone that does something really big and splashy. And a really interesting point that you made, which is right. If you only remember one thing of the game, what is that? And that will most likely be the thing that's potentially affected by the outcome of the game. And it seems like it's always card specific. Athreos itself didn't have a price hike, but the Shadowborn Apostles did. So it was the Apostles that was like the sought after thing. But it's cool. It pulled some cards out of the dud range, I think, and made them into like flash in the pan status or at least flavor of the month. But things tend to seem like they relax over time, right?
Yeah, I never saw a spike from you guys that, or even any spike for that matter. It seems like once the commander is like bottomed out, any spike that I see, I attributed some other spikes to some other content creators, and there were also some random spikes that I really couldn't figure out why they happened. But they almost always they were always spikes. There was never like a situation where like there was an Athreos type situation where that just got pulled out of, flash in the pan status into like a consistent
that way.
Yeah, right. I didn't see any of that.
Cool. Well, that seems like the Magic community in a whole. Something big and shiny comes up, everyone goes, "Oh, I like it!" And then after a while, something else comes up, and you just turn your attention because there's just new stuff all the time.
It is interesting that there hasn't been really a single legendary creature that over time people have been like, I didn't like that at first, but I do like it. It's kind of like they kind of revert to what they thought. Like nothing kind of pulls them out of that. Even Kozilek and Athreos just sort of settle back to where they were after a slight surge in popularity after being featured on our show. So
interesting.
Well,
that does bring us. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that the one oddity.
Segway Man is here again.
Oh my gosh, he did it. The Mad Lad. So we're on to final thoughts. Wow, they're zooming by now? Jeez, I gotta get a segue. Another data of note, there's some interesting anomalies and cards that can point us towards something else, something more interesting. I think you're just about to get there. What is this card that we've been hinting at this whole show?
This was the one I've been wanting to talk about. We could have just spent maybe a little while
Yeah.
talking about
Let's
this.
not name it yet because I want people to be able to guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just talk about how it's behaving differently.
Yeah, so this one behaved differently in the sense that when it came out, it was popular, but not the most popular. It was overshadowed by another commander that was really popular. But coming about I want to say, looking at the stats
6
here,
months?
about 6 months ago, it started just
And
steadily.
that was
increasing.
around 6 months after it came out.
Yes, yeah. So after 6 months, I think everybody was done with it, and then all of a sudden,
It
here
just
we are
starts
again.
to climb
and,
steadily from that point.
Tick tock.
It does the Avatar
Yep.
or the Titanic thing, which we don't really see any other commander doing, right?
Right.
Where
No, I couldn't find another example of this. This is the only
From this
example
data set.
that I found that
interesting.
looked like this.
okay, so you all out there are thinking like, what could this card be? I'm going to give you one hint, and then we'll name it.
Okay. Yep.
The one hint is it came out about a year ago.
Yeah.
So
And we talked about the card that overshadowed it in this episode already.
yes, and so and it was in a cycle of similarly themed 3-color commanders that all were elder dragons.
There you go.
So now we're getting closer. You're getting warmer. You're narrowing it down. It's not Arcades, which we've already talked about.
I didn't even think this was the most powerful of them either. I would have put the Jund one after this one.
Interesting.
After Arcades. And then
I think
maybe
I would have
this
put
one.
this one second, but
Yeah.
it is the big bad, Mr. Nicol Bolas, the Ravager.
The creature version that flips into a Planeswalker.
Right. So this is the one that makes everybody discard a card, and then flips to the Planeswalker. Very, very good card.
Yeah, it actually. Yeah. So what have you seen trend-wise with this, Donald?
Basically, I think once it was clear that we were leading up to some sort of Nicol Bolas situation, and I think it was around the time they printed that intermediate. I lose track of all the names of the Nicol Bolas Planeswalkers now.
Sort of the pre-con version.
When they printed the one, it was like the one in Ravnica like a few sets ago.
In Ravnica, you mean
it seems to be been going up.
There's
from
God
there.
Pharaoh.
God Pharaoh, yeah.
Yeah, that one. So right around that time when it was released, it started going up, and peaked most recently at War of the Spark.
I wonder why.
And I mean, I can see why.
Well, Nicol Bolas
Yeah,
as a story point became much more of a focus and a highlight, and that could be one of the contributing factors here.
He also got an incredible CG treatment done for him, right? We've never seen him look
cool
so
and,
cool before, and the same one for Liliana
Yeah.
as well.
I mean, just to put
Yeah,
a pin in it really quick here, or just to lay it out for people, what happens is M19 comes out. Arcades is far and away the most popular commander. Nicol Bolas is second, but pretty far behind. And Nicol Bolas steadily drops down for about the next 6 months. Arcades drops down too, but is still maintaining popularity above Nicol Bolas. And then about 6 months ago, Nicol Bolas starts to climb up in popularity steadily each month to the point where it actually crosses and is now more popular than Arcades,
Interesting.
which is no other lines on the graphs that we've looked at do anything like this.
Yeah.
They all kind of follow a similar trajectory, and after they start going down, they just continue to either go down or flatten out. They don't really climb back up, steadily over time. They might have a blip, but this is, it's pretty weird. I mean,
It makes sense, big bad. I think this is going to keep climbing up as well, just because the card itself is pretty powerful. It's in pretty popular color combinations of blue and black and red. But blue and black, that outside of green are considered, best colors in EDH. So I could see a lot of reasons, and of course, Elder Dragon I think has a teeny bit to do with it too.
well, and just Nicol Bolas, like Donald said, there's a bunch of Nicol Bolases. You can put them all in that deck. It feels right. So there's those people.
Yeah.
Then also there's the people that just look. No, I mean, like, if you're Vorthosian, whatever, there is that
route to go, right?
This is drawing from that, that well. But there's another well too of just like it's a good, powerful Grixis commander. In fact,
and has a unique effect of turning into a Planeswalker.
and just everybody discarding a card is very powerful. If you can do that a few times, multiple times, that can really wreak havoc on a table. I mean, it's card advantage when it comes in.
Right.
So, and then, flipping into the Planeswalker, obviously the Planeswalker side is ridiculous. It's a really good card and one that's actually probably better than the Arcades deck.
Yeah.
As far as like just power level.
Just power, yeah. Because
But it's
Arcades
not-
makes you play defender creatures. And
I mean, that's a sweet deck and
Yeah.
very powerful also. But I think the Nicol Bolas deck, if you want it to be, it just has a higher top end than the Arcades deck does. So there's part of that going on.
It's like I said earlier, it's a good blend of powerful and popular in this case. So it kind of has
Super
everything you need.
interesting, though. I mean, you look at all the other stuff around that time, and none of it's doing it what Nicol Bolas is doing.
Yeah.
Palladium Ors, Victus, Asmati.
Lathless.
They're
that's
all
the
just
mono red one.
doing the normal stuff. They start out,
Chromium. That's the
moderately
one.
popular, and they dip down and just flatten out after a while.
Yeah, that seems to be the general trend overall. And I think, cards that get a lot of initial excitement, but aren't that, exciting in general, tend not to stick. You put Slimefoot as an example down, which is like, this is it. This is the Saproling Slimefoot deck. You can finally do it, and it's a great commander, and it can kill everyone. But it's easy to envision, and then I think hard for a lot of people to take that into reality as they realize, maybe even in the process of doing it, maybe this isn't what I want to do. Maybe this isn't powerful enough.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much about Saprolings. Dragons and dinosaurs, apparently, though, different case.
All right, so where are we here? I'm lost.
We're talking about just final thoughts. Anything else that we came up with? I liked how rare cards make the staple list. I think that's correct. I think if every card made the staple list, we'd be designing too powerful cards too consistently. I think you need to have a mix of challenging people to build decks like Kashath and keep things on the more casual side for what Commander is to me, as well as occasionally feeding in the more hardcore cards that like Urza that obviously have a high power level, but and cards like Sisay, which can sort of be taken in the Planeswalker direction or just a straight power level, or a themed one where you're just trying to get the Weatherlight out, right? Like stuff like that, I think helps balance the format out instead of just consistently trying to create staples, and that's one of the difficulties of R&D.
I do think, like, if you look at it, our little hypothesis that the most powerful is not always in the most popular is pretty. There's some exceptions, but I think it's pretty close. I don't think. Vannifar definitely not making it on the made it list.
Right.
It's kind of a big signpost saying that Teysa Karlov is more popular than Vannifar, and it's definitely not more powerful. So that's encouraging to me.
People love Death Raiders.
But that's encouraging to me because that's hopefully Wizards sees that and they make more cards. Like Tolsimir is very much higher than it probably should be.
Right.
Kashath, those are two cards that stand out as like, and Arcades is another. Real big signpost of this sort of idea, which is that if Feather's another one, which is that if you make commanders that open doors that were previously closed, that's actually going to be more appealing to players than making commanders that just are raw power. That are just going to be very strong. That's not as exciting to your average player as something that says, hey, now I give you this, and it unlocks the key to all these thousands of cards that were totally unplayable.
And hey, it's going to be fun because you like big creatures, or it's going to be fun because you like big butts of defenders. Just like it sort of appeals to different parts of, I think, player types and personalities.
Yeah, another commander that just says, hey, all those cards that you already know are really powerful, put them in this deck and they'll be just a slightly better.
Yeah.
That's just not that exciting.
Yeah.
I think also, too, the one thing that I find interesting is like this play on the commanders between sets, like that follow up directly after each other. I mean, I think Simic is a really good example of this that hasn't really had any card that made it just because they've gotten so many good ones that do the same thing.
Simic.
I think that has something to do with
Poor
it too.
Simic having so many options that they now all do the same thing, where every time a Boros commander or a mono red commander goes out, everyone just holds their breath hoping it does something new.
I mean, look at Tishana, which we said, hey, that's a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
Color shift that to Boros, and it's the best Boros commander ever, right?
Yeah.
And people will be going nuts because it was just like all my Boros cards that don't do anything because I just can't play a Boros deck that's any good suddenly become awesome because I can have this new commander. So,
real value.
Yeah, I'm not saying they should color shift and do that stuff. Stay within the color pie, but Feather shows us there are ways to open doors that are closed right now, and I hope they keep doing it. Yeah. All right, to the listeners, there are so many legendary cards available to us. As commander players, do you see the same trends represented in your play group that we've talked about here today? Are there any patterns you've noticed? Which commanders seem to be the staples from the newer sets in your meta?
Yeah, I'd love to know how other people's LGSs function or your play groups. If everyone is just like no, we don't want to build the powerful thing. So whoever does build Urza, sure, you can do that, but none of us want to do it.
Right.
Or if everyone's like race to the finish, whose Urza is the best. Be interesting to see how that plays out across the world.
Nobody's wrong, by the way.
No.
Everyone's right as long as everyone knows what everyone else is doing. I think the only way you get yourself into trouble is if you build that uber powerful Urza deck and everybody else in your playgroup is playing Gashoth level stuff. Just make sure that everybody knows so they're on the same page. That's all. Don't pub stomp.
We want to make friends, not,
But it's totally cool. There's tons of group out there, and we hear from them all the time, and they're at the highest possible power level, and they love it, and that's great.
A quick shout out to you, Donald, and EDH Rec. You all are doing so much on your website now. There is a podcast with Matt Morgan, Dana Roach, Joey Schultz. Yeah. You guys have articles. You guys do brewing. You do deck techs. You do so much more.
Dana Roach is actually one of our patrons, too. So, Dana, you rock.
You rock. Anything you want to tell us about anything cool coming up in EDH Rec development that may be interesting to new users and old ones alike?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to bring this up.
You
we have
own the site. It's yours. You're allowed to do whatever you want. Sorry,
it's a perfect time to hype it up.
We stepped all over you. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have an Oathbreaker section coming out. So
a lot of people are going to be excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm like cautiously optimistic, and it wasn't.
Well, you did Brawl Rec for a little while.
It was actually pretty easy for us to do because we already did all the work for Brawl, so to add a new format. But,
one of them's got to hit eventually, right?
Yeah. Or they'll all sort of just exist in like it could be cool territory until it finally figures it out. I think we're all cautiously optimistic about things like Oathbreaker.
Yeah. I heard I haven't played it yet, but I have a couple of friends that really enjoyed the gameplay so far. So we'll see. I think from a deck building aspect, it doesn't excite me as much though. The couple of things, I think we're trying to figure out more ways to get the users more involved in the website. Is the best way of putting it. So we're constantly thinking about how to add this human element to the website. One thing that we're working on right now is this this more like human written guide on EDH. It's like it's like a Gamepedia kind of thing that I have my writers kind of banging away at. That's taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to.
As all things do.
Yeah.
We have like a couple interesting things going on. I think one thing that we're kind of working on, we mentioned the competitive crowd a little bit. I think EDH Rec has slacked a little bit on, just naturally not catering to that crowd due to the kind of averageness of the decks. And we're figuring out ways to build some features that I hope that they would enjoy. And I've been working with the Lab Maniacs guys on that.
I noticed recently you guys added, you separated out lands into utility lands and like
very useful
lands
by the way.
That are there for mana index, which was nice.
So let me kind of like give a shout out. Like a lot of like that feature took us, I don't know, a few hours to implement. And it was just this random recommendation from some user that sent it to us saying like, hey, it would be really nice if you separated these things out. I was like, man, that's such a good idea. So if you think you have a good idea, you can send it to me on Twitter or Facebook, or there's an email at the bottom of the EDH Rec page if there's something you've been wanting us to do. A lot of times I'll just say I don't feel like doing that. But I get a lot of good ideas from my users, and a lot of the features.
Well, EDH Rec, a place for the people, by the people, and is going to be your new go-to if you're looking for Oathbreaker content soon.
Donald, how do they find you? What's your Twitter? Do you prefer they tweet at the EDH Rec Twitter or at yours?
Yeah, that's my de facto. Yeah. The EDH Rec Twitter is something I'll see. If you email the email at the bottom of the EDH Rec page, I'll see that. And then we also have a Facebook page, so go ahead and follow that. And if you send us a direct message, actually Jason Alt is more the master of the Facebook page. But if you want to talk to him,
that's scary.
Can talk to him.
Now let's go, Jason. You got this.
Actually, one thing we have in the works right now is a whole bunch of our crew is going to Magic Fest Vegas, and so we're kind of coming together. I'm just planning out my decks and stuff like that. That's
Fogo de Chao, right? You're in?
Let's
go.
I think
we're going.
Yeah, I ate so much
the
meat
repeat
last year.
Let's do it.
I had really bad meat sweats after that.
I remember.
That means you successfully ate at Fogo de Chao, so congrats. Okay, well.
Yeah, no salad bar.
No, that doesn't exist.
Donald and his whole crew are like, will shame you if you go to the salad bar at Fogo de Chao. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's
listen,
absolutely.
we're all going to walk out of here full. I don't think it matters very much if I have a little bit of cheese in there or not.
Wow.
Which, by the way, they shamed me and I didn't go to the salad bar at all. So
Peer pressure.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I know. They got
Well,
me.
let us peer pressure you, the viewer, into doing something else, and that is using our affiliate link at Card
Segway
Kingdom.
Man is so good today.
CardKingdom.com/CommandZone. We talked about a lot of cards today, and we talked about some awesome cards from Modern Horizons, especially ones that we think are going to be making it into the all-time list. So if you want to buy those cards, type in that affiliate link, and you are right there. That's all you have to do, and just continue shopping like normal. CardKingdom.com/CommandZone.
And if you're going to build Urza, specifically, I know Urza, there is a Ultra Pro playmat of that commander that looks sweet. Yeah, there's very likely to be sleeves and the other accoutrements that go around with it. Any of the stuff from Modern Horizons, they're going to have themed things that are going to go with your deck. And I like having my battlefield be, themed if possible. It's cool to have like the Hapatra playmat, the Hapatra sleeves. Just
makes you feel better.
It also intimidates your opponent, or at least I think it does. I like to think it does. Yeah. Does it? Probably doesn't.
I think your actions in the game are always what intimidates me most. And then the rest of it's just like a nice flex, bro. That's a cool looking board you got there.
Well, Ultra Pro is your best place to go for all that stuff. So by supporting them, you are supporting us.
All right. Now moving on to the end step where we are supposed to talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. I have prepared nothing. Donald.
Oh, wait. I have something, Donald, but we always let the guests go. So if you've got something cool outside the world of Magic that you want to talk about, otherwise I can save us.
Please.
Okay,
save me.
This weekend I was in Yosemite.
Oh, yeah.
Yosemite National Park, which is in Central California, one of the natural wonders of the world, I'd say. Half Dome and El Capitan and the large granite mountains there. And we did a bunch of hiking and stuff, and we were staring at El Capitan, which is this 3,000-foot high monolith mountain, just glass granite thing that you can just stare at for hours. And of course, that made me go home and have to watch the movie from last year that I did not watch until now, which is Free Solo.
Free Solo.
So Free Solo is about a guy named Alex Honnold, who is a professional rock climber. This guy is the first person ever to free climb, which means no ropes of any kind, El Capitan in history of the world. And it's what most climbers say is the hardest mountain climb on the planet.
Which usually takes professional climbers anywhere from 2 to 3 days to finish.
Sometimes 6, 7. We were watching some people up there that had been up there for 3 days, and they had 3 to go on this trip. And he did it in under 4 hours with no ropes.
Yep. Free climbing is what Alex Honnold does. Arguably he's the best climber in the world. In history, yeah. I mean, this feat is unparalleled, but the movie's very thrilling because it's all about the documentary crew that have to accompany him and film him without disturbing him, and also potentially film his death should he fail or mess up one thing on this climb.
It's pretty crazy. Even knowing that he makes it, it's still nerve-wracking the whole time he's doing it. That's how good it is.
There was so much lead up to it as well, including his personal relationships, as well as his training, and like just the mundane like life things he's doing, like buying a house.
Yeah,
that all are inside this like pursuit to do the unthinkable.
Well, they also do this thing where they put him in an MRI and they scan his brain, and they notice that like the part of his brain that like processes fear is like, it's not like it's not there or broken technically, but it's like turned way down so that like stuff that would cause fear in normal people, nothing happens to him. He has to be in extreme situations to feel what we would think of as more mild fear. So it does make sense kind of that he's pushing himself to the limit all the time, because when he's in those situations, he's maybe feeling the amount of fear we would feel on like a roller coaster or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
in a nice safe setting.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Free Solo, it did win the Academy Award for Best Documentary, so it's not something that probably a lot of you haven't heard of. But if you've been on the fence or just haven't had the time like me to check it out, I would highly recommend it. It's riveting.
It's a fast watch too.
Yeah.
And I'm someone that's rock climbed for many years of my life. And if you are in any way a fan of that sport, this movie is it's an amazing thing to watch for you as well. Just because you get to see a master in the works.
And a crazy person.
I actually saw Alex Honnold at a climbing gym in Los Angeles with his girlfriend on Sunday.
Oh, really? Just like a couple days ago?
Yeah. Well, I got there and there's like it's whispering. I'm like, what's going on? I was like, dude, Alex Honnold's here. And it was like, oh, cool. It's like, is he like doing I don't know, like a book tour or something? He's like, no, he's just climbing. And then my friend's like, yeah, I said hi to him. And he just went, hi. Just like very awkward.
He does come off as an awkward guy.
Yeah,
socially,
he's just totally just like a climber awkward bro. And it was great because I saw him walking away and you could just tell him just sort of plodding away, just like going about his life. Just literally one of the greatest. It's like if you walked into a basketball gym and Jordan was there.
Yeah, just like shooting around.
Yeah. But also very awkward and nervous and then leaving before the gym got too busy. So that was cool to see.
All right, very cool. Make sure to check it out. And something else you should check out is our sister podcast, The Masters of Modern. Alex Kessler and Ben Bateman, they talk about the modern format, all things competitive Magic. They're going to have a lot to say these days because Modern Horizons is coming out or has come out when this podcast is out.
It'll definitely be out by then.
Yeah, so check them out. You can find them on Twitter at the MMcast. You can find them on YouTube. Just type in Masters of Modern into your search bar there. They're also right next to us at collected.company.
Actually, I think it'll be the pre-release that'll happen before the
episode
set comes out. But it's coming out very soon, so make sure you check them out to see what their thoughts are. Our editors for the show are Ashlyn Rose, Jared Lafreniere, and Josh Murphy. Murph. And special thanks to Geoffrey Palmer, as always, for the Living Card animations behind us. And on the beginning and ending of the episodes, you can find him at Living Cards MTG on Twitter. And, of course, very special thank you to Donald from EDH Rec for providing all of this invaluable data today for us to parse through and organize into this outline. It definitely was a team effort, and we know a lot of people over at EDH Rec and your squad helped assemble this, so a big shout out to them as well. Thanks, Donald, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, Donald, hopefully let's not wait 3 years or whatever till you're back.
4 years, I believe.
Was it that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
That is pretty nuts.
Make sure you guys check out EDH Rec. It is the place to go to if you need to start building a deck or just have questions about a deck or just want to see cards that are similar in decks that are things you want to do. Just go there.
I use it literally every time I build a deck. I don't think I've built a deck in the last 2 years where I didn't open EDH Rec.
Yeah, same here.
Same here.
Perfect.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter at JFWong and at Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.